One of the well-known inventors of the Industrial Revolution was James Watt. In 1760, the Scottish engineer created an engine that was powered by steam. It could pump water from the mines 3 times as quickly as the previous systems. In 1782, Watt developed the rotary engine that could turn a shaft, making it possible to drive machinery. Steam power was now used to spin and weave cotton as well as run cotton mills. Another important figure in the Industrial Revolution was George Stephenson. Stephenson and his son built engines in their workshop in Newcastle upon Tyne. There they also created the locomotives for the first modern railways in Britain. The Rocket was the first public railway line that opened in 1830. The Rocket extended 32 miles from Liverpool to Manchester and sped along, reaching speeds up to 16 miles per hour. Robert Owen, a social reformer of the Industrial Revolution, was a cotton magnate who came to believe in the creation of voluntary associations to demonstrate the benefits of cooperative rather than competitive living. His ideas appealed to some of the Unionist leaders. Owen initiated the Grand National Consolidated Trades Union, formed in February 1834. Its purpose was to coordinate a general strike for an 8-hour working day. The Federation, however, collapsed from lack of support. A main group of the Industrial Revolution were Luddites. These were skilled craftspeople in the mainlands and northern England. In 1812, they attacked their machines that they believed threatened their livelihoods. They were against unrestrained industrial capitalism. Despite their efforts, they did not stop the mechanization of Britain. Another main group through the Industrial Revolution were Chartists. These were British workers who looked to improve their conditions. This was the first important political movement of working men organized during the 19th century. Their aim was to achieve political democracy. They demanded universal male suffrage, payment for members of Parliament, the elimination of property qualifications for members of Parliament, and annual sessions of Parliament. Chartist petitions were sent to Parliament in 1839 and 1842. They were later rejected. They wanted to change through peaceful constitutional means. Initially, this gave working-class men and women a sense of working-class confidence.
There are many events that happened throughout the Industrial Revolution in Britain. But an important event that happened that led up to the Industrial Revolution was the Agricultural Revolution, which by definition was the application of new agricultural techniques that allowed for a large increase in productivity in the 18th century. Now, the Agricultural Revolution that happened in the 18th century led to the changes in the methods of farming and stock breeding that characterized this agricultural transformation and led to the significant increase in food production. British agriculture could now feed more people at lower prices. Unlike people in the rest of Europe, even ordinary British families did not have to use most of their income to buy food, giving them the potential increase and purchase manufactured goods. At the same time, rapid population growth in the second half of the 18th century provided a pool of surplus labor for the new factories of the emerging British industry. Rural workers and cottage industries also provided a potential labor force for industrial enterprises. Another important event in the Industrial Revolution included the Combination Acts in 1799. They were passed due to the British government's reaction against the radicalism of the French revolutionary working class. In 1800, they also outlawed association of workers. This legislation failed to prevent the formation of trade unions. Trade unions were formed by skilled workers in a number of new industries, including the cotton spinners, iron workers, coal miners, and shipwrights. These unions only served to work for the people in their trade, though against the employers. Some trade unions were even willing to strike to attain their goals. And due to this blatant illegal activity, this caused Parliament to repeal the Combination Act in 1824, accepting the argument of some members that the acts themselves had also alienated the workers, that they had formed unions. Unions were now tolerated, but other legislation enabled authorities to keep close watch over their activities. In the Industrial Revolution, the Factory Act of 1833 was introduced, and the number of children employed declined. Taking their place was women, and they began to dominate the labor forces of the early factories. Women made up 50% of the labor force in textile factories for 1870. They were paid less than men, of course, due to the social status at that time. The Factory Acts that limited the work hours of children and women also began to break up the traditional kinship pattern of work and led to a new pattern based on the separation of work and home. Men came to be regarded as responsible for the primary work obligations, as women assumed daily control of the family and performed lower-paying jobs, such as laundry work that could be done in home. Domestic industry made it possible for women to continue their contributions to family survival. The Factory Act of 1833 strengthened earlier labor legislation. Although many countries within Europe prospered due to industrialization, Ireland was one of the most oppressed areas in Western Europe. Irish peasants lived in mud hovels in desperate poverty. For them to live, they needed the vegetable, the potato. The potato was essential to their life. The Irish population doubled because of this, and probably half of this population depended on the potato for survival. But in the summer of 1845, the potato crop in Ireland was struck by blight due to a fungus that turned the potatoes black. Between 1845 and 1851, the Great Famine disseminated the Irish population. More than 1 million died of starvation and disease, and almost 2 million immigrated to the United States and Britain. Of all the nations in Europe, only Ireland had a declining population in the 19th century due to this famine. This famine interrupted the life of many Irish people and led to their population, which had once doubled, to increasingly decline. The country of England was the first to industrialize within Europe due to several reasons. Those reasons being the agricultural revolution and the fact that nowhere else in Europe were people so accustomed to using paper instruments to facilitate capital transactions. Also, Britain had ample supplies of important mineral resources, such as coal and iron ore. These were needed in the manufacturing process. Not to mention that Britain was also relatively small in the grand scheme of things. So the distance to transport goods was relatively short. Unlike continental countries, Britain had no internal custom barriers to hinder domestic trade, so the transportation was easier throughout the country. Finally, it placed fewer restrictions on private entrepreneurs than any other European state. But for the most part, Britain had its industrial revolution first due to its mineral resources.
As new modes of transportation began to form and trading became more popular, the French Credit Mobilier was very important in funding those different developments. The Credit Mobilier was a French bank and a very important financial institution. It funded other banks, transportation, and much more in France and North Africa. Although it was to help other countries economically, the loaning started to create a worldwide economic depression in the 1870s and was eventually replaced by the Banque de France. The Industrial Revolution took place in Great Britain, most importantly in the town of Manchester, England. It was very significant because it was close to the electrical port in Liverpool and it also had the first railroad connected to it. That meant that trading and transportation would be really easy. And then as a result, Manchester became the textile capital of the world, and many migrants started becoming attracted to the city. With new migration came urbanization, which furthered many new industries and wealth in Great Britain. But also, migration meant that different neighborhoods would start becoming really crowded and unsanitary. Overall, the urbanization and industrialization of Manchester helped grow the economy of Great Britain and new industries to further the Industrial Revolution. During the Industrial Revolution, there was a big growth in cities, but cities preserved terrible living conditions. Those who were able to support themselves financially lived in a poorhouse, which was a tax-supported residential institution. So in other words, it was a way of providing welfare. Living conditions in shared spaces resulted in an unhealthy environment. There was a lack of proper sewage, and there was water pollution due to the slaughterhouses, which affected their lives. In other words, there was no sanitation. This resulted in investigations from the Poor Law Commissions in Britain, which provided reports on living conditions. They noticed families were more subject to disease, there was prostitution and crime. To improve these living conditions, Chadwick advocated sanitary reforms that consisted of sewers and cleaner water, which led to the creation of the National Board of Health, which was greatly supported by the middle class. And ultimately, the poorhouses led to a call of new health reforms. Some of the jobs during the Industrial Revolution were becoming dangerous. One of the most dangerous jobs to have in the 1800s was working in a mine. To prevent this, the Mine Act of 1842 was administered by Parliament, and it stated that no female or boy under 10 years old was to work in the mines. Ultimately, this act was in response to the working conditions of children and women. Also during the Industrial Revolution, different economic and trading ideas began to surface, and one of the most important ideas was Zollverein, created in 1834 in Prussia, which was a German customs union. And basically what a German customs union is a group of different nations agreeing on the same charge for imports or just allowing free trade. The Zollverein diminished these tolls on different rivers in furthering trade and prosperity among the nations. The Zollverein was significant during the reunification of Germany because it allowed the middle class of Prussia to begin to accept unification.
There are many ideas and innovations that bolstered and contributed to the Industrial Revolution, one of them being the invention of the flying shuttle by John Kay in 1733. Before the invention, it was only possible for cloth to be woven up to a maximum of the width of a man's body across his arms. That meant that the weaver had to pass the shuttle backwards and forwards. The invention allowed the shuttle containing the thread to be shot backwards and forwards across a much wider bed. The flying shuttle also allowed the thread to be woven at a faster rate, thus enabling the process of weaving to become faster. This essentially meant that the work of two people could be done, but even more quickly than that. Manufacturers and owners of factories quickly got their hands on the invention. But the invention of the flying shuttle did lead to many angry mobs of weavers and workers who felt threatened by the competition, as it did halve labor costs. Another revolutionary innovation at the time that helped to secure the prosperity and progress of the Industrial Revolution was the spinning jenny. This was created by James Hargreaves in 1764. The increased speed of weaving created a new problem because it now took more spinners to keep up with one weaver. This problem was solved when James Hargreaves invented a new machine that was capable of spinning 8 threads of cotton yarn, instead of the spinning wheel as one. Probably one of the most revolutionary inventions of the Industrial Revolution was a water frame, which was created by Richard Arkwright in 1969, when he realized that hand loom weavers could not keep up with the demand for cloth. Richard Arkwright created the water frame, or a spinning frame, and it produced stronger threads of yarns. The first models were powered by water wheels, which is what the device got its name from. It was the first powered and automatic textile machine, and it led to the move away from small home manufacturing towards factory production of textiles. The water frame was also the first machine that could spin cotton. The water frame really bolstered the importance of factories, which would later have a great role in labor and production. Since these factories use water as their power source, they tended to be built in areas where a good supply of fast-flowing water was available. Because they looked like large water mills, they became to be known as mills, and were mostly concentrated in mountainous areas of Britain where water was plentiful. For the first time, men and women were separated in their work. Men stayed at home to produce the weaving, and women left home each day to work in their factory, producing the yarn to weave in a cloth. The superiority of Great Britain's technological skill and technical ability was greatly showcased in the construction of the Crystal Palace, but was also displayed in the Great Exhibition of 1851. The exhibition showcased many innovations and technological developments from Great Britain, but also showed the innovations of other countries, which were lackluster in comparison, and really showed the disparity between the Industrial Revolution of Great Britain and the slow rising industrial revolutions of other European countries. Another important aspect of the Industrial Revolution was the Bank of England. In the 17th century, the Dutch were in the forefront financially, but with the establishment of the Bank of England in 1694, their supremacy was effectively challenged. The bank provided incredible backing for new ideas, new innovations, and this resulted in great prosperity and wealth for Great Britain, and allowed it to establish its dominance in Europe through its superior industrial revolution.